Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a WOMENACE to society.
Then so shall you be.
Welcome to WOMENACE to Society. I'm so thrilled today to be speaking to Dr. Michael Horton of Coffee Bunker. How you doing, Dr. Horton?
Very well, thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you for joining me. You're with Coffee Bunker. What exactly is Coffee Bunker?
The Coffee Bunker is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It is a nonprofit organization that supports military and veterans in particular in their transition back to civilian life. We started in 2010 by the mother of a Tulsa Marine whose transition did not go well and ended in a suicide. And his mother was determined not to let that go in vain. And she thought had her son had a place to go and be with other vets and talk about their situations and just kind of work together on what it's like to get transitioned back in, that might have ended up differently. So all of our work every day is rooted in that heartbeat, and that's what motivates us.
I'm sorry for that gentleman who took his life, and I'm sorry for his mother's suffering, but I'm glad she contacted you to start this up. Did she reach out to you because you're a psychologist, or did she reach out to you because you're a veteran? Or how did that start?
It just started with her reaching out to various community leaders with the idea. It was a group of them that were the initial starters back in 2010, and I came along about 2 years ago as the executive director.
And where were you before? Were you serving in the military, or did you have a private practice?
I am an Air Force veteran. After I exited the Air Force many years ago, my journey has been one of working in education and psychology and business consulting, and I'm at a time now where this came along to me as a new opportunity back in August of 2016.
Well, it sounds perfect for you, Michael, because you have all the pieces of the puzzle, considering everything you've been
Hopefully.
through. I've never served. I've had a lot of family members who have served and are currently serving, and a lot of good friends. And I know that our veterans experience a lot of issues when they come home, especially from being deployed in combat. What are some of the issues facing your people who come in for help?
I think every veteran that starts the transition to civilian life basically has to learn to manage three systems. They have to learn to manage the Veterans Administration system. They have to learn to manage the human resources system as they attempt to get civilian jobs and things like that. Others of them have to learn to manage the enrollment and admission systems of the colleges. In addition to that, many of them have to learn to manage their own internal issues of just the stresses and strains of that transition, because so many of them have been in the military for 6 to 14, 15 years, and some of them did not even have civilian jobs before they went in. So that transition from military life, military culture to civilian life and civilian culture is always challenging for them.
Well, it sounds like a lot of paperwork, patience, and foreign environments.
And the need for a lot of support, a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring for people along the way. We want them to come to the Coffee Bunker first, and from there they start their journey and use us as a home base, and we connect them with all the right resources to get down the road where they need to go.
I know that you're helping female veterans, and I would imagine female veterans have certain issues that are unique only to them, and men are having other issues that are probably only unique to men who've served. Men don't typically talk about their emotions. I think it's gotten better. How hard is it for some of these returning soldiers to come in and talk about how they're feeling, about being annoyed or frustrated or pissed off or hurt?
Well, I think the key ingredient there is that it's much easier to do that with fellow veterans, or at least people who are military oriented, like National Guard, even reservists and active duty. So that's the context in which it's the easiest for them. Otherwise, it just needs to be people who are aware, wanting to hear, and willing to walk alongside.
I never really considered the idea that you've been in the service maybe 14, 20 years even, and you never had a regular, if there is such a thing, job or a civilian career. And now all of a sudden you're coming out of such a structured environment.
it is not uncommon for women or men to graduate high school and shortly thereafter go into the military. So they have very minimal work history in the civilian world, and now they have to try to translate their military experience into some kind of a civilian resume. And we also work with them very closely to do that because we want them to be employed meaningfully and productively. And one of our roles is to help translate that military experience into civilian work skills. And when that resume needs to be strengthened, we provide training classes and certification classes to get those resumes where they have items on them and skills on them that are attractive to civilian employers. A lot of times the military resume already shines because they've applied themselves and done things in a productivity way in the military that by itself is very, very startling. And so we just try to take that and say, well, but what else you got to have is some skills that civilian employers consider to be those that bring value to their workplace, and we work very hard to get them with those on the resume so that even if they have no experience in a particular industry, any industry would look at these skills and say, okay, we can tell this person is up to date and they have continuous improvement mindset, and we want to talk to them.
You have these resume classes, which I would reckon is invaluable, and you also have a lot of other classes. What's your most popular?
We have education or training classes in 2 or 3 different areas. One is on the technical side because it's almost mandatory that people these days going into any of the industries have certain skills in computer utilization, all the way over to some 3D stuff, to fabrication stuff, those kind of technical sort of skills. And so they have to have at least a minimum base of those kind of skills. We collaborate here in Oklahoma with several different organizations and provide training for those kind of skills. The second track of skills would just be for job skills. I think in that area, what we look at are under the context of continuous improvement skills that would relate to what some people would know as Lean, Six Sigma, continuous improvement. And those are skills that demonstrate a person can be in a work situation and see things that need to be improved and take the initiative to do that and build projects around continuous improvement. So those skills are valued by all industries. Then we have other classes in team leadership and in problem solving, decision making, workplace communication skills, and the list goes on. The third track is just for personal development, and sometimes it's really helpful and necessary for a person to go through a little bit of a challenge with who am I in the world. I've been an Army, Air Force, Marine, Navy person for a long, long time, and they don't really have a clear identity of themselves as a person on the civilian side. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of classes and experiences that we have people go through that kind of helps them to clarify that a little bit. So those are our 3 tracks that we send people through, and they're pretty popular.
And they sound like great classes. They sound like good foundations too. If you're returning from, combat or being deployed somewhere that's extremely different than what you grew up with.
Yeah, we kind of look at it through the lens of neuroscience, and to say that they went into the military during a time when they were young adults, and so their brain cells got shaped by the military
right?
in a certain way. And so we have to help them realign their brain cells and their neurons back to civilian life, and sometimes that takes a little longer than it does others.
Well, it makes sense, right? Because isn't a lot of stuff muscle memory?
Yes, well, that and just the way you think through things and how you got to problem solving. And in the military, most things are done through a hierarchy of a command structure, and most civilian markets feature some kind of a team-based organization. So they have to go through some flexibilities and some practicalities to get there.
And you're in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the coffee
Correct.
bunker. Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Oklahoma has a lot of veterans and a lot of people in the service. Do your local merchants and community organizers get involved with you?
I think, generally speaking, Oklahoma, Tulsa, the state and cities that are considered vet-friendly. We have quite a few vets who move here from around the country with that knowledge. And so we know that. And so our employer market is fairly sensitive to that, and we work closely with them. And so they're very vet friendly in terms of their hiring practices. In the retail world, we often see folks offering various kinds of discounts and parking conveniences and things like that for veterans. So it's a friendly place to be.
Excellent. I have a good friend who lives in Oklahoma, and he injured his back. He was in combat, and he was lucky enough to get his surgery approved by the VA. Everything's going extremely well. It's outstanding for him. Do you work a lot with the VA? Do y'all collaborate on projects?
Of course, from our standpoint, our collaboration with the Veterans Administration is to help. First of all, we provide a place for Veterans Administration benefit officers to come to the coffee bunker and have interviews with the various servicemen to clarify and to educate them on what their benefits are, and that's very helpful.
And I just want to thank you for doing that, because I know it's very daunting, especially if you're going through something like a physical ailment or PTSD or whatever you're getting through, and then all of a sudden you have all this paperwork to fill out and you're not sure how to process it. So thank you very much for filling that void and bridging that.
Well, it refers back to one of my original comments, and we have to help them manage the VA system. And the system itself has its own challenges, and they do their business the way they need to, but it helps for us to be walking alongside men and women who don't understand what's going on, and to kind of help them explain to them step by step what they need to do and why they need to remain diligent and resilient while they're working through the system. Otherwise, they get frustrated, irritated, and then they make bad decisions out of that. But the other way we collaborate with them is that, referring back to my story about how the bunker got started, we want the bunker as a place to be our first line of defense or prevention for things like suicide, because we don't want any of the veterans to be feeling like they're alone or they're isolated or anything like that. And so in Tulsa, any vet knows that they can get up out of their chair, out of their apartment, and come down to the bunker and be there with people who care about them and know about them, and they can just calm down and chill out just for a little bit. So that being the case, the Veterans Administration provides the therapy that is clinical in nature, and we support that by providing the therapeutic activities that are non-clinical. So we're more about the long-term development of lifestyle and those kind of things that support good mental health for the long run. We don't do the therapy per se, but we certainly want to come alongside of it and support it and make sure that it works for everybody.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, because that makes all the difference, I would imagine, if somebody just is having a horrible episode and they're triggered, and at least they know they can come to you and have a seat and have a hug and get somebody.
That's exactly right.
Somebody understands it. They're not judging you. No one's calling to report you or that kind of stuff. You don't have to worry about. I mean, maybe I'm putting things together that don't even happen. But I would think that a lot of people who are ex-service are hesitant sometimes to pick up that phone because they don't want it to reflect badly upon them. They don't want the blowback that will be negative from being so grief-stricken or so triggered. And now they have you, and that's monumental.
Yeah. Well, our guys are trained. We have an extensive training program for our vet peer-to-peer support program and for our volunteers to be able to listen and to determine pretty quickly if a person just needs somebody to walk alongside and listen for a while, or if they need to be under treatment immediately, and we can manage both of those situations.
Excellent. I read that 22 American veterans commit suicide every day.
That's probably the national average right now, or what's being reported. That's pretty close.
So how do we fix this? I mean, obviously there's no Band-Aid to throw upon this situation, but what are some things that we can do, people like me who have never served, what are some things we can do to help?
Well, if you're around veterans a lot, or you're in contact with them, or through your community services, we can just offer up our model. And we think, number one, there needs to be a place for them to go so they don't feel isolated. Secondly, whatever organizations are, and most cities have organizations that are veteran related, and we encourage them to start peer-to-peer vet support systems for places when the vets go and need to talk to somebody. There are veterans there who can chat with them and talk to them a little bit. And then thirdly, we just need to be able to encourage guys that when they are in a situation where they need to be in treatment, they make themselves amenable to that. And so those are three of the things that we look at quite a bit. And usually, if we can do a good job on the front end and just have a listening ear and talk things through people, and they get to just hear some voices of reason and care, that's usually pretty strong, and they don't feel quite so much that way. But we also encourage them, if it's time to go see somebody at the VA, then we need to take you over there and let you get started. But what the point is there, we don't turn loose of them. As soon as we do that, they're in a relationship with us, and we also are there to help them and to support them when they're finished.
Mm-hmm. So it's like a start to finish process of not
and also
sticking with it.
We kind of step in and do some things for them that their family systems can't do. So a lot of times the families are unaware of what's going on, or they don't understand what's going on. They can call us, and we can certainly explain to them and have them come in, and we talk with spouses and parents and things quite often about their situations. And so if a vet is in treatment or when they get out of treatment, we can be there to kind of help them structure their next few steps. We can be in a motivational place that family members can't be.
That's huge, because so many of us have family dynamics and family patterns that we're still trying to navigate as we age. And then on top of that, coming back, now you've got all the baloney you've been dealing with your dad or your mom or your aunt so-and-so, your cousin pain in the butt, and now you're coming home and they don't really understand what you've been through, but you still have those other issues y'all were working through before you even put on your uniform and shipped out.
Well, there's that, and then there's also, especially the vets who've been through any kind of wartime or battle experience with respect to what is now being referred to as moral injury. And moral injury is usually described as something that a veteran has done, even though sanctioned, in essence, violated his or her own moral code. That, or they saw something that violated their code, or maybe they participated with others that violated their code. And those are the things that when they return, even though they may have been decorated and awarded for that, they return and it eats on them for a long, long time. And they are deathly afraid of saying anything to anybody, because they would say, well, if my parents or my family or whatever knew this was a part of my experience, then they just wouldn't believe it. So they are very reluctant to talk about those kind of things, even more so than just their regular experiences.
Well, I would reckon that's real complex, that situation, because
Very complex.
Yeah, you had to do this was your job, and then at the same time you have your humanity.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot to carry with you.
Yeah, so moral injury is a little different than PTSD. PTSD is something that's usually prompted by a trauma, and later on it's usually re-prompted by similar kinds of experiences or memories, whereas moral injury is not necessarily trauma-based or trauma-related, but it just weighs on them for a long, long time. And at some point in time, they don't start beginning to release that. It can become problematic to them, and it looks a little like PTSD with the depression and things like that, but it's more rooted in conflict of my own values within myself, depression, and it's the things that they would say beforehand. I never thought I would ever do something like that, or I never thought I would ever see anything like that. And then they did, and now they've got this dissonance to deal with in their life.
Well, yeah, that's a horrible situation.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I like this. I don't like, but I'm intrigued by this moral injury. When did this come about, this new diagnosis, this new idea of calling it this?
Yeah, well, it's actually been around in some form or another ever since there's been war. And it's certainly not related, specifically to American soldiers, and it's not even specifically germane just to military. Anybody can have moral injury in their life from anything that they've done that they never thought they would do, and it casts a little bit of a shadow on who they think they are as a person. But in the military life, it's a little different because You may have been authorized to do what you did. You may have been sanctioned to do what you did. You may have been expected to do what you did. But still, you thought, given that situation, I would not be a person who would do that. But then it happens, and you do it. So there's a lot of research on it right now, a lot of things being done. The VA is starting to look at it. It is not like a diagnosis that you would read in the diagnostic manual that psychologists use. There's not in there for that. Components of it in there. But at this point in time, it's not a mental disorder, or there's no diagnostic code for it. But everybody kind of knows what's going on out there with it, and more people are becoming aware of it, and how you deal with it is at different levels. Sometimes it's religious level, sometimes it's not, and we try to just train all of our peer support veterans and all of our volunteers just to listen for it, and it usually unpacks itself in terms of a story.
Oh, I bet it does. I bet a lot of pain and all kinds of emotions come out of that.
We have to be ready for it.
Yeah. Do you find, you're a doctor, do you find that people are becoming more empathetic, more open to understanding that so many of us have been through things that we are processing and sometimes not even processing because they're so painful, or we're so deluded about what we've been through sometimes, and people are slowly kind of getting that, or what?
For the record, for your listeners, when you say the word doctor, for me, that's a doctorate in education and psychology. So just wanted to clarify that. I think it's surprising to me in my own experiences with people, how many people have something just below the surface that they deal with in a kind of it's an emotional issue, but it's something that they've been struggling with for a long time. Something has happened to them. They're going through something right now. It's a grief. It's a hurt. It's a deep-seated pain. It's a deep-seated disappointment, something like that. And it's just right below the surface. And you may not see it in their normal interactions of their life, but right below there, if you talk to them just a little bit, it's just right there. And veterans are no different. So they've just been in situations where that was magnified and maybe much more traumatic in its experience.
Yeah, and I would think too, you don't really have time to process that stuff if you're getting shot at, or
No,
if your
that's
tank is
correct.
under fire, and you know what I'm saying? Like you got to just deal with what's in front of you and then process all that later. But who wants to revisit that stuff? I mean, what human wants to go back and revisit all that stuff? Most of us don't.
Well, people don't necessarily want to go back and revisit it, but we know that if they don't deal with it in some way or another meaningfully, then it can cause them problems. And you often see it, and guys can't figure out why they're crying all the time. They're distracted easily. They isolate. All those kinds of behaviors, and people are saying, well, gee, what's wrong with Johnny? He's just not himself, and this and that. And he can't bring himself to share that with anybody. But sleeplessness and these kind of behaviors are what typifies that more than anything else. So it's a tough thing.
But do you think we're kind of getting better at recognizing that in one another?
I'm
being too optimistic.
There's enough of it out there once it's popular media and things like that where we talk about it. But I think we have a ways to go, and I think just now at the Veterans Administration, they're beginning to open up and have some different kinds of workshops and groups and things like that, specifically for moral injury, and so I think there's a good trajectory and a good direction being able to manage that.
I think that's fantastic. I'm inspired by that. This might seem like a really weird question to ask at this point. I was going to ask you about homeless veterans. Do you think some of them are experiencing like hyper traumatic moral injury compounded with other medical and emotional issues?
It's very likely that they've chosen homelessness for a reason that's close to them. Who knows? Each metropolitan area seems to have different kinds of issues with veterans and homelessness, although some of those issues are very similar in nature. In Tulsa, there's a nice collaboration between various nonprofits, the VA, and the Mental Health Association. And our collaboration simply asserts that any mental illness, that having a home is the first level of response to that. So the homeless guys, they can be there for a variety of reasons. There are a combination of economics, unable to manage a consistent job, and or some other kinds of mental health issues it's a very complicated thing. But I think in most areas, people and communities are addressing that issue, some better than others. but it's certainly not something that's disregarded. So here in Tulsa, we have a program through a community service council called Barracks, BRRX, and they are an organization that speaks directly to and manages housing issues for veterans, and we refer to them and work collaboratively with them and just try to make sure that that homelessness is a very, very short span of time.
Yeah, because that's horrible. All these people on the streets, first of all, but especially the veterans being out there. It's just heartbreaking. What advice would you give young people who've just enlisted?
What we're talking about in many cases here is a pretty small percentage of all the folks who have been through military or whatever. On the front end, we are pro-military as a life option for high school graduates. Okay, I think in almost any city that has a pretty high percentage of high school graduates that choose not to go to college, we ask the communities and their parents to take a hard look at what the options are for a young person if they choose not to go to college for whatever reasons. They can't go to college, others may choose not to go to college. What are your options? And we ask them to look at the military as an option. Not too many options can provide what the military provides in terms of meeting the basic needs, providing career training, providing support for education, and taking care of all your health care needs, and making sure you got a good uniform to wear, and you don't have to worry about what you're going to do when you wake up this morning. That's all provided for you. And so for those who are really needing a platform to kind of launch their life a little bit and those kind of things, well, we are very pro-military on that. So for those who go in, I say congratulations. You're now in a place where you've been given a really nice platform to go ahead and get your life started. So you're certainly not going to waste your next 2 to 4 years in that respect. You're going to be very productive, learning new things and learning how to work in a team environment and working on own personal discipline and all those things that make for good adulthood.
Yeah, those are some very good traits to have to be a functioning adult.
Yes,
And a
yes.
lot of us don't have them.
Well, so we want to encourage them to make that choice if that's what they need to do. And then you get to come home from your first leave, and you have a little status now because you're now a full-fledged member of the United States military, and you're on your way. So you're going somewhere.
What changes would you implement, Michael? If you could implement an immediate change right now for returning heroes, what would it be? What would you
Changes
change?
for the vets would be we want to encourage them. All the branches of the military have a mandate through any particular military installation that when the personnel are getting ready to leave, they have transition programs that they have to go through to before they can get out, and those are fairly good. But usually guys are so focused on getting out that they don't pay much attention to it. So the first thing they need to do above all is to make sure that they get some meetings with a qualified veterans benefits service officer so that they know all of their benefits that are available to them. And then from there, they begin to build their life around that, because some of those benefits relate to employment, some of them relate to education, some of them relate to health, some of them might relate to housing. They just need to know what all those benefits are so they know what their resources are to start from there. So that's the very first thing they have to do while they're kind of enjoying their first few weeks and months of not being in the military. They still need to know those things so they can make a good decision and not be missing out on those things.
That's great. That makes sense. And what about the community?
Well, the community needs to have some sense of how many vets they have in the neighborhood, who's there, and sometimes some of the issues that they are facing. And so for most communities, they will know that either through their employment networks or through their local campuses. That's where the vets are most easily found. So, and I'm not too sure. Usually the organizations that deal with the veterans are more the ones on the side of homelessness and mental health and things like that. But that's just a fairly small percentage of all the vets coming out of the military per se. And those are the ones that usually the chambers of commerce can be very helpful, working with the agencies that work with jobs and things like that. And they can also be helpful with local campuses in making sure that the veterans who are there are getting the support that they need. Because one of the other issues that people don't know much about is that, if a vet has never been to college and he comes back to Tulsa and he is now, or she is 27 or 28 years old, and they went to college at our local community college, they are going to be in a classroom with 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
And so there's a problem there with that and the experience, and a lot of 18-year-olds don't have any way to understand this person. And so there's a big disconnect there in terms of socialization and things like that.
Well, yeah, you just got shot at in Bahrain, and now you're watching the people in your classroom eat Tide Pods.
Yeah, the universities and colleges can play a huge role in that. And most do have an understanding of that. Sometimes it just doesn't go quite far enough in support that through, training the faculty on what to do with veterans in the classroom and things like that. But there's a lot of things there that they could step up and do.
Mm-hmm. What's next for the Coffee Bunker? What do you have planned coming up?
Well, we got on the fundraising side, thank you for asking that. We have our annual fundraiser coming up August 23rd. It's called Bunker Bites, BITES, and we will be having an event at a local appliance store that actually is Metro Appliances here in Tulsa. They clear out their showroom for us, and then we have folks come, and they have 10 different very, very modern kitchens. And in those kitchens, we have local chefs come, and they create for us bunker bites. And that's our kind of like our hors d'oeuvres and things like that. So instead of it being a formal dinner, it's more conversational in nature. And so that's on August 23rd. So I would invite people to take a look at our website, coffeebunker.org, and they'll catch all the information about the fundraiser coming up. And if they're so inclined, we would love to get support from people all around the country about the Coffee Bunker. And we're also very amenable to people calling us up for conversations around the question, can we start one here?
Oh, that's lovely. How many of these are in existence? Is it just you right now?
The thing that we do here is pretty unique, but there are other organizations around the country, not too many of them. There's one in San Diego, there's one in Waco, Texas, there's one in Louisville. I'm pretty sure that there are similar kinds of organizations around, but there aren't very many of them right now. So,
we need to change that, Michael.
Yeah. Kind of get out there and start that. Start a new work. Okay, in terms of advocating for that. So different communities see it a little bit differently, and so each one of them has a different kind of angle, but they're all very much up for the same purpose.
Well, it's a good purpose.
And I also want to remind people that they on the website they can just find that word called donate, and we would love to participate with them on that and have them collaborating with us. And maybe they have people here in the Tulsa area that we can be of help to as well.
We'll certainly try to get the word out to help you. And I probably won't be there for Bunker Bites, but I'll send y'all a little check.
Well, come on down and deliver it.
I'll do my best, but in the meantime, I'll send some petitfours and hot dogs via check.
Okay, we got you going on that. We'd love to do that. So
yeah,
we're gonna have a very good time that night, and it'll be a fun time together.
Well, I hope it's remarkable, and I wish I could be there, and maybe I will be able to drop by, Michael. And I think you're fantastic, sir, and thank you so much for what you're doing to help some of our most vulnerable citizens.
They do become vulnerable in ways that people wouldn't realize, but every community, and this is one of the things I just want to stress to people, every community, I believe, has a responsibility, like an accountability at both a moral and an ethical level to be aware of and to address the needs of these young men and women who have answered the call to protection and to form that human shield around the country and to be our protectors, whether it's here or somewhere else. And my own piece of that is that, these are all people who have stood up and taken an oath to defend, not the flag, not the president, not mom and apple pie, but to defend the Constitution, a living and sacred document that we hold dear, and the umbrella under which we enjoy all of our freedoms and our lifestyle. And that's what we put our life on the line to protect and make sure that everybody is a recipient of that. So that's what they've all done. And whatever they have endured in process of doing that, we need to honor that and step up and make sure that they get the best support they can as they re-enter civilian life.
Amen. Thank you so very much, Michael. I think you're just incredible. And I greatly appreciate you being so gracious and generous with your time and talking to me and my listeners.
I very much appreciate the invite, and hopefully we'll bump into each other somewhere down the road.
I would like that very much.
Thanks, y'all, for listening. Please come back to next WOMENACE Wednesday. You can find me on my website, lisalandry.com. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you will receive a free audio download. Shout out, Ari. I love you, little boo-boo.